Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of WWT Experts. I'm your host, Matthew Coble, and today we'll be talking with WWT expert Jim Stuckey. Jim is a manager within Worldwide's automation team, and he's worked with a lot of our clients on digital transformation, IT modernization, and automation programs, especially in the global financial services market. When he's not being a slightly obsessive technology leader, he's spending time with his 4 children and being a slightly obsessive college football fan. So please welcome Jim. Jim, it's great to see you.
Good to see you.
Thanks for joining us today. How's it to be back in St. Louis?
Great to be here.
Good. Awesome. Well, we will jump right in as we like to do. So I want to start talking about enterprise automation, right? So it's becoming increasingly a hot topic. And I know infrastructure automation has been around for a while now. So where do you see infrastructure automation now versus, in the past several years?
Past several years, it's been advancing, definitely throughout the last 5 to 10 years, right? So going from basically scripting to rolling out orchestration models across, orchestrating models and frameworks across the entire environment, right? So across domains, across platforms, and expanding out into things like edge computing and event-driven automation.
Well, Jim, one thing we hear over and over from our clients is that they're turning to automation to drive efficiency and simplicity in the work that they're doing. So I'm curious about your thoughts around those principles as it relates to automated infrastructure.
Sure. Efficiency and simplicity should be a goal and an outcome of all of our engagements. Working with our clients, trying to modernize their environment as well as take some of the tedious tasks away and, deliver an outcome that basically provides, economic value back to the client.
Yeah. And do you think of organizations as sort of starting with the idea of simplicity or efficiency, or is that more like an outcome that they get to through the work that we do with them?
It's typically an outcome that they get to when we're working with them. That it's usually a complex problem that they're trying to solve, or trying to gain some kind of labor efficiency through, like I said, tedious and mundane tasks that the day-to-day engineer doesn't really want to have to deal with anymore, and it hurts, employee experience at the clients.
Yeah. Well, if we're thinking about, the idea of automated infrastructure, where do you see clients on that journey? I imagine that there are people sort of in the early stages of that still and other organizations that are much farther along. So tell us about some of the examples that you see along that pipeline of activity.
So we definitely see clients across all of our verticals and the spectrum of, industries that we work in at various stages, right? Anywhere from, early on just doing basic scripting through, applying that orchestration framework across a single domain, then to multiple domains, all the way up through, the nirvana of infrastructure automation is getting into that automated operations and AI ops.
Yeah, are there some specific kind of examples you can share with us about, maybe not naming any names of client organizations, but I'm curious if you can tell us some examples of like an early stage client, kind of where they are, and then sort of a later stage, more mature client within this space.
Absolutely. We get a lot of engagement in, we're heavily in the network space, right? Doing automation in the network space. And they may just want to do load balancers and starting there and see where they work from there, right? So we'll come in, work with the client, do the automation, working with them in parallel to develop the code and deliver an outcome that they've expected in the load balancer space. We also work with some of the larger global customers where they are probably years beyond that basic example,
yep.
And they're not just doing it in the network space, they're automating the entire network space, the storage space, the compute space. We have projects where, we call it the immutable data center, where, a lot of these global financials have been tasked with basically paving and repaving an environment within hours. Mm-hmm. So the only way you can do that is through automation, and it's a very complex problem that we work on with them, and, been successful delivering that.
Yeah, and in that case, as I understand it, you're really revamping the entire data center while you're still running the data center, right?
Exactly.
It's a challenging problem for sure. So infrastructure teams, I imagine, at times, as they're thinking through automation, they might get stuck, right? And it could be anywhere along that life cycle, from kind of learning about it all the way through to super mature organizations. what are some spaces where people get stuck, and how do you kind of counsel a client to move past those points and carry on with what
Absolutely. The main place we see them get stuck is where to start, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times they'll get a mandate from above saying, I need you to automate everything. Okay, well, everything's a lot. Where do I start, right? And it can cost a lot of money as well. So, we try to come in and work with them, through briefings and workshops to basically figure out what the easiest path is to deliver some automation and show value back up the chain, as well as working through that backlog of use cases and developing a strategy of what are the next use cases that would make the most sense.
Yeah, and based on what I've learned, a lot of organizations start with some of the grassroots stuff, and then they kind of step up into more of that automation strategy. Can you tell us some examples of some automation strategy work that you've done? Is there governance? Is it throughout the IT organization? Do you bring in business? How do you really think through the right strategy model for automation?
Definitely. So typically we're brought in through one organization, and we have to basically work with the other groups to, through workshops, through briefings, bring them all together to come up with a strategy and a framework that's going to roll across all the environment. So if you want to roll out a server, you don't just need the server team, you need the network team, you need the storage team, you need security. So it's getting that buy-in across all of them. And in the end, the goal is to basically have them aspire to build a center of excellence across automation.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned earlier that a lot of clients think they want to just automate everything. The work comes down from the top, and then we help organizations automate everything right? So pick the right things and then automate them correctly. How do you guide clients to really prioritize the right things to automate as they're thinking through their strategy?
So when we're working with them, we definitely weight and value map the items that they're looking to automate, and in a new engagement, especially for the team that's new, we run into a lot of new teams inside the client base who are just getting into automation or getting into it from an enterprise perspective. Starting with the most complex problems, usually not the best idea, right? So it's working with them on use case ideation, basically weighting those use cases of what can deliver the value back to the client the quickest and show the most value to the end user, which is a lot of time the application teams, helping them, like I said, increase that developer velocity and deploy their applications quicker and feature functions, et cetera.
Yeah. I also know that more and more infrastructure is moving to the cloud, and organizations have these sort of mixed environments of on-premise, hybrid, multi-cloud, full public cloud environments. How do you guide people to think about effective infrastructure automation across that broad landscape that they may have in place?
Yeah, we get a lot of requests for, I just need a single tool that can do all the automation, internally or externally,
right? It doesn't exist?
It does not exist.
Okay.
But what we do is work with them on things like pattern work, governance, standards, and procedures that allow you to basically use the same set of automation internally as well as externally, and maybe using multiple tools, and that's okay, right? You don't have to have one tool that rules them all for this, as well as working with them to get those goals and aspirations externally, and getting visibility, working with like the AIOps team into visibility internally and externally.
And then do you see that it's sort of easier to do automations in the cloud? Is it easier to do it on premise? Is it the mixed environment? Or is that just sort of a fallacy to even think of it that way? It just depends on the
I think they both have their challenges. I think internally, it's standardization and configuration. In the cloud, a lot of that's very standard and the configurations are very similar, but we see every day coming out with a new service and a new product, right? So it's keeping up with that expansion.
Yeah. So what are some good places for IT organizations to start as they're either thinking about kind of embarking on the automation journey? I imagine many have already underway at least a little bit. But how do you guide people to start wherever they may be on the maturity curve of things? What do you start? How do you get going with infrastructure automation?
Absolutely. So we try to work with them and find what's the most painful, tedious task they're working on now, right? And how do we solve that through automation? And how do we then look at that from a end user view, right? And basically create a great user experience for self-service portal is a good example, right? We integrate a lot with ServiceNow and self-service portals, so the end user doesn't even see what goes on behind the scenes. They just know that they need a VIP, and they put in a request, and there it is.
And we also kind of know that a lot of infrastructure automation is connected to different technologies that make that possible, but we've also learned that it takes shifts in people and process and culture as well. So I wonder if you speak some about how you counsel clients to keep that side of things in mind as they're doing their automation journey.
Absolutely. So a lot of pushback we get early on, it's usually through the engineering teams, is you're going to come in and automate my job away.
Yeah.
Well, that's really not what we're doing. We're coming in and automating tasks that you probably hate that you do every day, that you don't need to do anymore. I mean, a network engineer can only have so much fun doing port on, port off so many times manually, versus it just being automated away and out of their work stream, and they can go and focus on more interesting and more complex things.
Yeah, so you kind of elevate the workforce to get to focus on
Yes.
more interesting stuff and so sort of advance their skills, right?
Yes.
And does that, I mean, are there other ways that creates an even better experience for employees as they go to work? Do you see that sort of evolution in organizational cultures as they move forward with infrastructure automation?
Yeah, we've actually had some conversations with some C-level executives that said that automation has helped them with retention, right? Because those engineers aren't working nights and weekends anymore. A lot of those tasks have been automated away, right? As well as, like I said, the mundane and tedious tasks are out of their jobs. So now they're able to take those engineers and focus them on, more interesting tasks, different types of projects, new and innovative things versus, day-to-day operations.
Yep. All right, well, kind of getting towards the end of the question set here, I'm curious, I always like to ask our experts where they see the market going. So I'm curious if you look out 2 to 5 years into the future, what are you excited to see within that infrastructure automation space?
Absolutely. So we're definitely excited to see where it's moving into the edge, right? So it's moving out of the traditional data center. We're seeing more and more automation coming available through our OEMs, as well as requests from our clients in the industry looking at IoT, things like cameras and PLC devices, as well as event-driven automation. So a good example of that is if you have a help desk and it's outsourced and you're paying by the ticket, event-driven can actually automatically react to whatever the ticket is coming in and solve the problem for you, eliminating that cost. And it's always a good discussion with the client. It's a self-funding business case.
Yeah, and so it sounds like the infrastructure that needs to be automated or can be automated the footprint of that keeps getting bigger and bigger,
Absolutely.
right? And more devices, more technologies. Do you think that's going to continue expanding at that pace, or is it going to start to slow down? Or
No, I think it's going to continue to expand, right? It's as soon as they start seeing the efficiencies in one area, how can we do that in the next area, right? And then we're also seeing it move up the stack into the application side, as well as things like automated operations, right? So AI ops moving, that's the next step of infrastructure automation.
Yeah. And then, I know that we hear in the marketplace that ChatGPT, generative AI, and all of that stuff is super exciting in the marketplace. Is there a role to play for that in the future of infrastructure automation? Do you see that fitting in as well, or what are you excited to see
I think so. It will go right. You have a playbook right now for Ansible if you need it to. So how good it is, it's not great yet, but someday it probably will be, right? So,
right.
But yeah, it's definitely part of the future.
Yeah, I think so far it should support what we do, but not replace it.
Absolutely.
But we're getting there. All right, well, always great to see you. Appreciate you coming and spending some time with us, Jim. So thanks for being here today.
Absolutely, thank you. It's been great.
Yeah. And thank you for coming as well. Another great episode of WWT Experts. We've got a great back catalog of episodes out on WWT.com. Plenty more on the calendar coming up. Head to WWT.com/events. Check them all out. Thanks for coming today, and we'll see you next time.